I think, I mean, certainly that's what I do is I help people sell their law firms. And as it relates to that, I would say more so than the selling part, but the actually getting ready to sell it, to the
Mm,
positioning and what that means. Because you don't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to sell my law firm. I mean, it feels that way sometimes, but there's years of, you know, emotional trudgery that someone goes
sure.
through. Sometimes, if they feel burned out, but there's a difference between being burned out and actually wanting to exit.
Get ready to be amazed. Get ready to be transformed. Get ready to believe it is possible. You're entering the growth zone on the Guts and Glory Show with your host, Louise Scott.
Hey guys, it's Luis. I am the host of the Guts and Glory Show, a show dedicated to helping you learn more so that you can be bigger and better than you were before. Today, I'm excited to have a guest, and we're going to be talking about law firm ownership, law firm sales, law firm buying, law firm selling. I mean, we're going to talk about all things getting rid of your law firm, maybe, hopefully for the right reasons. We'll see what happens. But I have Victoria Collier here from Quid Pro Quo, and I'm excited to have her on the show because she has sold a law firm, now getting ready to buy a law firm. I mean, there's just so many things going on that we could talk about today. So Victoria, thanks for being on the show.
I appreciate it, Luis, for sure.
All right. So tell us your backstory because you sold a law firm and now before the show, you told me you were going to be buying a law firm. I think people want to know what's your backstory. How did you even get into this?
So my backstory is before I sold a law firm, I built a law firm. So I started my own law firm right out of law school in 2002, and built it up to a 7-figure firm for at least 5 years before I sold it. And it was specifically in estate planning. And then within that, I created my own niche in veterans benefits and taught lawyers across the nation that. But in 2018, I started thinking, I need to transition. And so I specifically hired a PLA, a professional legal administrator, to help me position my firm to sell. And I sold it in 2020. And so, I love, love, love practicing law. I love being a lawyer and I loved my clients. But sometimes it gets to a point where you don't love the business that you're in. And that became my law firm.
I can see that. Now you started right out of law school. That's not very common. What made you take that leap? Because I have friends who have done that and I see how miserable it is in the first few years. So what made you go into kind of your own practice right out of law school?
I think it's a combination of, I think, three things. One is I'm from Texas and I'm an Aries. So you combine those two attitudes of arrogance or confidence are the first two leg up. And then also had been a paralegal both in the military and on the private sector for some years before going to law school. So I felt like I, had some knowledge behind me. But ultimately, it was not my plan to start my own practice right out of law school. I had a plan to work for other law firms. But when I clerked for somebody for a year, my third year in law school, I had presented him with a business plan so that I could show him that I could bring in 3 times my salary that I was requesting, which back at the time, I recall it was in 2002, I was asking for $65,000 a year. And so I could bring him in 3 times that. And I had it all outlined, which is interesting because he had no business plan. And he essentially laughed at me. And so I was like, okay, fine, then I'll just take my business plan and do it on my own. But not before I went and I interviewed judges, I interviewed attorneys, I interviewed all kinds of people. And the main story I was getting, which is aligned with what you're saying, is most people were telling me, oh, you should work for someone else first. You don't know what you don't know. And you need to cut your teeth and all these things, until I finally had lunch with this one lawyer. And he had said that he had started with someone else first and worked there for 3 years. And then he started his own firm. And he said, I just wish I had done it from the beginning. I wish I had done it 3 years sooner. And that's all I needed to hear. I can't tell you how many lunches I had until I heard that one thing. And I was like, of course, that's what I'll do. So
Yeah, you just needed permission to go out on your own. And sometimes it's like it's the one catalyst that really gets you to the next point. 65,000. By the way, that's a dream to find a lawyer for like you can't find that today. Like
no,
lawyers right out of law school are asking for 100, 110, no
yeah.
experience. It's a crazy world today. So but it all worked out for you. I'm curious when you were building your firm, because there are listeners who listen to the show who are maybe not lawyers, but they're building other types of service-based businesses. Like one of the things that we work with people who own like accounting firms, tax firms as well. And the challenges seem to be all the same. And so I'm curious to hear your experience when you talk about starting that firm, possibly with not a lot of money, not a lot of resources. Like what were the early stage challenges? And then what were the challenges as you became a 7-figure firm?
Yeah, so I had zero money when I started my firm. I paid for my first month's rent, my last month's rent, and my furniture with my very first client, which was $4,500. And from there, I knew that I should not be the one answering the phones. And so I hired someone to answer the phones. But my challenge was doing the accounting in QuickBooks, because I thought I could do that. I was a numbers person, but I started entering double entries and voiding things and all kinds of nightmarish things. So it was really, I guess the beginning challenge was trying to figure out what are my skill sets and what are they not, and hiring those that I did not do well at. So an accountant was the second hire that I made. As I grew, I really believed in the model of growing with paralegals. And while I tried to hire associates, I never could hire well in associates. And I think it's because I could hire paralegals well because I was one. I knew what I could expect of them. I could hold them accountable. But with associates, I saw them more as my peers. And I wasn't emotionally mature enough to hold them accountable because I felt that they were adults and they should have as much drive as I have and enough, the same initiative that I have. But the fact of the matter is they weren't the business owner, and they didn't have any of those things, and they were still looking for leadership. And so as I scaled, I would say that my biggest success was learning how to become a leader and less of a manager, so that way I could hire people at all levels, not just people that I considered roles beneath lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think you're alluding to, which is this idea of having the confidence to lead, because I think what happens is that we're always very good at leading people who we view, and I don't say this in a negative way, but beneath us, right?
Mm-hmm,
Anybody
right.
who's beneath us, like it's easy to be a parent to children who are young. It becomes more difficult to be a parent to children who are adults and our age and want to do whatever they want, right? Like how do you become like they're no longer beneath you. They're not in your household anymore. They have their own lives. It becomes much more challenging. And I think even in like the personal relationship space where I see a lot of challenges is generally once your kids become adults. Like a lot of people have trouble with that. And I think that really applies to the law firm. It's like we have to build ourselves to the confidence level where we can actually manage people who are not beneath us, but who are actually our co-equals. And I love to use this, concept of like they're co-creators, co-collaborators with us in this business, especially as we're scaling up and growing. Now, one of the things that you alluded to at the beginning, you were talking about creating the environment for selling. So like preparing to sell your firm. So now you started your firm. It's something that you clearly had like the burning desire for. You start your firm, you grow it, you have all these challenges, you then get to 7 figures, successfully managing that for several years. And then you had to prepare to actually sell your firm. I think this is something of great interest to a lot of people because I am hearing about a significant amount of burnout, overwhelm from CEOs and law firm owners. So what was that process like of preparing the firm for growth, for sales, excuse me?
Well, I would like to tell you what it should look like. And
Okay,
that
yes.
is
Yes.
I'm not even going to go so far as to say from the beginning, but at some point when your firm is healthy and you are comfortable or complacent, you have to think at some point you're not going to be here, and you're not going to be operating a firm. And I'd like to think that you're not still 50 years ago thinking that I'll just shut down my doors like everybody before me has, or I'll just hand my cases over to a good friend. Good friends don't want your cases, right? And so what they want is a business, and people who want businesses are willing to pay a pretty penny for it. So I would say that the transition starts with the realization that I am not going to always be here. And therefore, what should I be planning for in the future, whether that's 3 years from now or 30 years from now? What does that look like? So that way, then, if I've got a plan, then I can also then plan for the awareness. And I think, Luis, it's all about awareness at every stage. And it's awareness of, am I burned out, or do I want to get out? Because burnout is temporary. We can change that. But if I really want to get out, then we don't want to change that. We want to make the best situation out of that. Whereas we never want to make the best situation of being burned out. I mean, there is no best situation. It's get out of it. So it's having that vision for the future, not of just how much money can I make, what kind of house can I live in, but what is my legacy and how do I want this firm to end or transition when I'm not here?
What is the difference between burnout and wanting to get out? How do you know? Like, because I know, I mean, I work with people all the time, and they're just like, my business is, it sucks. It's like, oh, it's draining me. And so it's like, how do you know if the person's in burnout, or if they're just not made for it anymore?
All right. So it's complicated, but I will say this. The most simplistic way to explain it is someone who's burned out has zero vision and zero energy. Someone who wants to exit, they can see a vision of something different. They're going towards something. And they may not have all the details in place, but they're excited about what that could look like. And they still have the energy to put towards that. Whereas people that are burned out, they can't see forward. They can't see backwards. They are literally just stuck.
This show has been brought to you by 8-Figure Firm Consulting. At 8-Figure Firm, we help law firms turn into law businesses. Stop wasting your time with gurus who've never built a successful business. At 8-Figure Firm, we'll show you how to unleash the power of your law firm for personal and financial freedom. For more information, go to 8figurefirm.com. Welcome back to the Guts and Glory Show with your host, Luis Scott.
So if I was like, let's just suppose that I'm feeling overwhelmed and I have a vision and I have energy, just not for my firm, I'm probably the type of person that wants to get out, not necessarily burned out. Is that kind of how you would see that?
Yes, kind of like that. Yeah, exactly.
When you were in the process of kind of preparing your firm for sale, this is the question that I get, because we get approached by lawyers like, hey, buy my firm. And a lot of times, it's like, you don't have a firm, you have a couple of cases, right? And it's to your point that we don't want to buy cases, we want to buy a firm. What is a law firm worth? How do we get to that? How do we get to that valuation? And I know you may say, well, find an evaluator or hire, a company like yours, which we're going to recommend, at the end of this show. But how does a person understand what a firm is worth? Like, give me the factors that we have to look at.
So the factors we look at is certainly a history of income. Let's just start there, because that's where everybody wants to believe that your entire value is just based on what you've done historically. Mm-hmm. And that's a starting point. But let's just look at the realism of it. You're not going to be there anymore. And what you've done historically has nothing to do with what a buyer can do going forward. So we have to look at what's predictable. So has that income been predictable? Therefore, a buyer can say, well, then at least it should continue to do this if I, as the buyer, do certain things. I also look at who is on your team. Are they going to realistically still be there on the team, assuming the culture stays the same or gets better, and that you treat them well? Because the team is what makes the world go round, if you will. At least from an entrepreneur standpoint, an entrepreneur is going to come in and say, I want to be able to buy a firm that I don't have to step in and do anything other than lead, manage, check the numbers, right?
Yeah.
And so you can't do that if you don't have a team of some sort. Then, of course, there's what brings the cases into the door. What do you do for that? The more you can automate, the more you can make it towards the firm and not the owner, so that the firm's not dependent on the owner or the owner's reputation or their owner's face, the better. Now, that doesn't mean that the owner can't still be on the billboards. I mean, look at the finance companies like Charles Schwab and, all of those. Their names are out there, but nobody ever meets with that person.
Yeah.
So it can be done right. But all of those things and more take into account what the firm is worth. And of course, you'll hear, well, the database, how big is the database and how warm are they? Do you touch them? All that. That certainly is important and more important in some types of firms than others, those that have repeat type of business. So we're looking at repeat business as well. Because if you have repeat business, then that's more valuable than someone's type of service that doesn't have repeat business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'd like to say, well, it's, like people want to throw out there the rules of thumb. Well, it's 1 times your gross or 3 times net. It'd be nice if we could sum it up like that. Nobody would ever have to get a valuation,
Right.
but it's not that easy.
Yeah, just do the factor. It would be nice if that was the case, but unfortunately, they're always looking for a deal, and so they're not going to just submit to that, that standard look. If you had to narrow it down to one thing, because I do have an idea on this, and I'm curious to hear if you believe the same thing that I believe without me necessarily telling you, but it's going to be in the question. A predictable way of generating business is probably your most valuable asset, true or false, in the sale. If you have a predictable way of generating business that is not dependent on the owner, is the most valuable asset in the sale of the firm.
I would say that is in the top 2 most valuable aspects of the firm, if you can verify that it's predictable and not dependent on the owner.
Yeah. What was the other one? You said top 2, so it would be the other.
Again, I'm going to say it's the team, because you've got to have someone who does the work.
Yeah. So the reason I say that is because one of the things that we stress at 8-Figure Firm is make your business predictable, create more predictability.
Yes.
In every aspect, whether it's lead generation, sales conversions, hiring, whatever it is, production, make it predictable. It's going to be more valuable, and you're raising the equity of the business. But you would agree, if you did that, then that would create the greatest level of value.
Well, this is what I would say. Is it creates the more likelihood that it would be sold. I can't say necessarily it would be more valuable, although I believe it will. But from a dollar cent standpoint, I wouldn't be able to tell you, well, that's exponentially more. What I can say is that the more predictable you can show, the more likely someone will want to buy it.
And that makes sense. I mean, when I think about our law firm, it's a big law firm. So no matter how predictable and it is, you may not have a buyer in the market who wants to pay the factors that we want, right? Like I may say the business is worth 3x our gross or 3x our net, and there may not be a buyer that exists in the marketplace that's willing to pay that. And so at the end of the day, the buyer may only be willing to pay 1x, and then you're kind of stuck with that.
Well, and that comes down to the positioning and the timing, because if you want to hold out for your 3x, there probably is a buyer out there somewhere at some point. It just may not be as early as the one that comes in at 1x. And for firms like yours, for example, I would say in the next 5 to 10 years, firms like yours should be positioning to sell to VCs, non-attorney owners, because I think that's the wave of the future.
I love what you're saying. I love what you're saying. Now, I want to sell my firm. I'm listening to the show, and I've realized I'm not overwhelmed. I'm not burned out. I just want to put my energy somewhere else. Tell me the 3 things I need to start doing immediately.
Number 1 would be to make sure that your financials are clean as they can be on the P&Ls. And I don't mean just that, you're running the right things through it, but if you, for example, do estate planning, list out how the income comes in for what services, because you're going to have, for example, some lawyers that want to buy an estate planning firm that say, we only do trust and we don't do will plans, and 50% of your revenue is from wills. which is great because then it can, it's like speed dating. I'm interested, I'm not interested. But if you don't even have the data, you're wasting everybody's time. That's number one, is clean P&Ls. Number two is the data, like how many people are calling your firm, how many people schedule appointments, what is your marketing doing for you? And so you've got to start collecting data so that people can analyze that for themselves. So that's number two. And number three would be get your key position roles in place and make sure that those people are going to stay with the firm. So incentives.
I love that. When you're on the opposite end, you're not thinking about selling, you want to buy. I mean, that's something that's been on our vision board now for a couple of years, is buying a firm. We haven't found the right firm, probably because we don't know what to look for. How do you know that you're ready to buy? So like, forget about how do we know if we should buy? How do you know you're ready to buy? What law firm owner is truly ready to buy another firm?
That's interesting because I am helping some lawyers buy firms right now, and I think it's going to be part of our business model that we get rid of. But and that's because lawyers don't know what they want to buy. They just know they want to expand, either geographically, expand, financially, or in services. So those are the three things that we generally think of is why would you want to buy a firm? You either want another location, you want more money, or you want to add services you don't already do. But it goes beyond that. And I would say that any prospective buyer should really be thinking to themselves and asking themselves, how does acquiring another firm fit into my overall mission over the next 10, 20 years? Mm-hmm. And so you have to really know what your vision is for your own business and your firm. And then how does that fit into that? Because if it doesn't, you shouldn't be acquiring it. And so the unfortunate thing is that it just sounds cool. Well, I'm buying up firms, I can buy up firms. And it's like the shiny object syndrome. And so I would caution against that. You don't just buy a firm because you can or because it sounds good. In fact, I was just talking with a person today. They've only been in practice for less than a year, and they're already talking about buying firms in other counties. And I was like, why don't you build your firm first and then expand from there?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that a lot of times what people see is they see what they believe to be an easy way to grow fast. Like that's what they see. And they don't realize there's a tremendous amount of complexity to buying a firm that has a different core values, different culture. And frankly, none of the people were hired by you. So like you want to make sure that you're, looking at all those things.
Absolutely. But I would say my answer would be different if we were talking about, for example, a senior associate buying a firm that they've been at for a while. That's a whole different answer. Or a brand new attorney who has business acumen, and maybe not a brand new attorney, but they've been working for other firms, and now they want to go out on their own. I do think still it makes sense to buy a firm versus building your own in that scenario as well. But that's meeting their personal mission. It's not a person who already owns a firm gobbling up other firms. That was the answer from before. How does it fit in your mission? But if you've been an attorney, you know what you're doing on the attorney side, and now you want to have your own firm, I'm a big believer in buying versus building.
Yeah. And it is faster. If you think about it, it is going to be faster. So that's always a good thing. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for shedding light on this. I think it's huge. I think a lot of people want to know how they can buy and sell their firm. They want to know how they can value their firm, either for sale or to value a firm to buy it. And I think that the wave of the future is going to be a lot of consolidation. I think people are going to be consolidating their firms. And as people do become disenfranchised with their law firms, they're going to be wanting to sell. And as people continue to retire, and I think it's a great opportunity as well. We're looking for that great opportunity. We'll see if it happens in the next couple of years. If people want to know how they can get your information, how they can work with you, how they can find out more about buying and selling a firm, how can they reach you?
Absolutely. So the first place to start is to go to our website, which is quidproquolaw.com.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, thanks for being on the show. And you guys have heard it here first. You can buy a firm, you can sell a firm, but you just have to make sure that it's part of your vision and your mission. And if it is, That's the wave of the future. And so be excited because 2024 could be your year. Thank you again, Victoria, for being on the show.
You've been listening to the Guts and Glory Show. For more and to learn more about Luis, hit the website at luisscottjr.com. For consulting opportunities, hit 8figurefirm.com. That's the number 8figurefirm.com. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and we'll see you next time on the Guts and Glory Show.